Hey everyone, John Michael Swift. Welcome back to my little mini-series on hybrid dominance. I'm going to show you a bunch of chords that I use in some songs that I've written to kind of get like I describe it as a tangy quality. There's a lot of jazz chords you can use to kind of, kind of add like a sort of like, bitter quality. I'd say kind of a slightly creepy, dissonant quality. It's, that's a way of going about it. These chords are a little different. They give you sort of a, a different kind of sweet quality, and when you use them in, in different relationships in the key, they can create tension, but not in such a dissonant way, which I really, really like about them a whole lot. In the last video I did on these, I call them hybrid dominance, I gave lots of examples of popular songs that use these chords. This one, I'm going to use all examples from songs I wrote for an album I'm going to release hopefully later this year, called The Listener Effect Volume 1, which is all songs I wrote about, people that I did interviews with. And a lot of people were interested in artists from kind of like the 60s, 70s, 80s that use these types of chords. So I focused a lot on their styles, but tried to innovate kind of my own ways of using these chords. So I hope you find these helpful, maybe as like diving off points for your own creativity or just, just for interest. So yeah, let me try to get into them. Real quick reminder of what I'm talking about. What is a hybrid dominant in the first place? Well, basically what I'm saying is that it's a type of slash chord. If you have like a major chord with like a second degree in the bass. So if I had this F chord and I use this G, if I use a G in the bass, and that goes to 1, that is one example. You could also use a minor triad and use the 4th in the bass. So if I had an A minor with a D bass, that would give you the same effect, basically. There's a very similar type of chords, a very similar quality. So it's really these types of voicings. It's really like a slash chord, altered bass type of voicing. And trying to find these types of things and like special ways they can get used. That's really what this is all about. Okay, so one of the first examples I came up with was just a really kind of simple variation on, everyone kind of knows this 1 to 7, 4, minor 4. That minor 4 chord right there, I found that, doing that cadence in either direction, let's say I'm going back to the key of E. If I'm in the key of E, I actually wrote 2 songs which I kind of did it in opposite directions. And there's one song I started with kind of this minor 4 chord. It's like an A minor 9 with a B bass. And I kind of went up to like a B over an F sharp minor, which is kind of like sort of like a B over an A. Or I suppose that's also sort of like the minor with the 4 in the bass that goes to E. I'll actually show you how that gets used. It's in the bridge of a song called Little Boat. It goes like this. Then one day it hit me, I broke down and cried. I forgot the only thing that was keeping me alive. My candle's just a flicker now, my rope is at its end, but love's the only thing that hasn't, here it is, left me for dead. And then it goes into a solo there. And you see how this has a very kind of very, very creepy, but really kind of pretty quality at the same time. It kind of opens up into this. But these altered bass chords just have a very different feel. They feel much wider than, if I just did like, A minor. It feels kind of very flat to me to like, it just has a flatness to it. I just really don't dig at all. Whereas like, this kind of, and there's another song I actually wrote, which I kind of did the opposite direction. I'll play the passage really quick. It's kind of also close to how the song ends. It goes like, it's called Flying. Like the eagle whose spirit renews in the sky, which out of waters first grew. When you feel you can no longer try, you must fly, fly. And then it kind of goes into a solo there. But you kind of see I almost did the opposite direction where I did sort of, this is a B over an A. Well, what's A chord, B bass. So that's kind of like your kind of standard hybrid dominant. And then I turned that into that same A minor 9 voicing, which is essentially like the opposite direction of what I did in Little Boat, but they both work to kind of drive it to the cadence. I really like how both of those turned out. So there's an example of just like taking a really common chord progression but spicing it up with this other bass note. So that's one thing to look for, is just any kind of chord progression that will do that. And actually, there's a couple, so both of those examples actually had other hybrid dominant chords in there. So I'm actually going to chase a few of those other ideas down. So going back to the Little Boat example, a really common trope in any kind of rock and roll, you got a 1 chord, you do like a flat 7, 4, 1. That happens all the time. It's like Little Help from, oh, I get by with a little help from my friends. Same chord. It's just like flat 7, 4, 1. Happens all the time. You're going to know a gajillion songs that have that. Well, one thing I found I really liked to do, and I actually did this in 2 of my songs as well, was I took that chord, I used that bass motion. I used that, that 1 to flat 7 to 4 to 1, but I actually did the hybrid dominant over it, and I used kind of like mixture triads with it. So that D chord, instead of being a D, it was a C chord with a D bass, and then I used the A bass, but then I used, instead of an A triad, I used a G triad with the A bass. So basically the progression now goes like this. Sounds a little spicier than it was before, and if you hear where kind of I came from in the Little Boat bridge, it goes blah, 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 blah. I use these kind of spread out triad voicings to give it a more spacious feel. It's coming up. These are all still just triads over open strings, so they're spacious, but they're just triads. Now right here, that's a D over a C chord right there. That's the G over the A, and then the minor 4 over the B. And that right there, that's your 4. That was your flat 7. There's your 4. And there's that just kind of turned into the minor 4, but now with the bass note, and then it opens up. So that's just kind of cascading through. That just took 2 hybrid dominant phrases and kind of rammed them together to kind of extend the tension in that phrase. I really liked how that played out for me. The other song I used it in a song called Old Piano. I'll use some more examples from that in a bit. But just right there in the verses, it's just like, sometimes I just get sick of certain chord progressions. I just want to throw a little twist kind of in the middle of them. So I eventually get to this point where I a woman named Kathy Good taught me to play back when I was 7. There's nothing fancy there. That's just kind of a pretty standard chord progression. I want to twist the second time. She taught me to reach for one I didn't believe, how to feel the tunes and the rhythm. And I actually use that to modulate to E right there. What you'll see is I kind of started the same way I did, 1 up to 3. It sounds like, practically like, geez, what's that song everyone wants to do? Freebird. It's almost Freebird already. But instead of going down to 2 or up to 4, I went to my flat 7. There's my D. There's my C right there. Opens up to that A/G. And then I actually modulated to the key that I did the other progression, and I went kind of up to an E there. So actually, now that I think about it, that is actually borrowed from the key of E where it's going to, but it works fairly well in the key of A, because you're kind of coming out of this C, you're basically just doing, mixture chords in the key of A as well. That's a D over a C, and there's plenty of rock songs that would go, that use the C and the D just the way I did in that progression. Or throwing like the G, which is the flat 7 of A, that's a perfectly legal thing to do. Rock songs do that all the time, so it doesn't sound so foreign. But in a way, it kind of like twists those chords in a way they're not usually done with, So when you listen to that whole modulation, she taught me to reach for one I didn't believe, how to feel the tunes and the rhythm. My first real piano was a story in Clark. Then it kind of goes on from there. But I really like how that modulation played out. And it has a feeling that a lot of other modulations don't have because of those chords that I used in it. So let's see. What else did I throw this into? So another really common thing that I find useful is to use an altered bass pedal Use a pedal that you wouldn't otherwise use. And just having triads playing around a static bass, that will often give you some really interesting things. There's a couple songs I used in that. And if I go back to the flying example I did a little bit before, that's basically what I did. Is I'm getting towards the end of the song, and I've got, I start on the 1 chord. It's in the key of E, but I've got this 5 bass. And I'm just playing that, and I go to the 5. So it's the 1 going to the 5, same bass. And I go to the 3. Creates a little bit of tension, but that B is still in the chord. So E, B, and G all have the B in them. So I've kind of done that. Now I get to this chord. I just kind of took that G and moved it down to half step. Now that's a little bit creepy. But that chord, actually, I've used that a bunch in other things. I remember in the last example I talked about, the Carole King, where she goes, "You just call out my name." You go from the 1 chord to the 5, right below it with the same bass. That's the same voicing right there. Instead, I'm just going from, the flat 3 down to the major 2. That's a voicing that actually shows up in a lot of other examples. It's just a different voice leading to get to it. And then it goes to, it's almost like the sharp 2 going up to the A. And that kind of major 2 going up to 4. That's the same progression you get in the Beatles. Ooh, I need your love, babe. Guess you know it's true. That's the 1. Up to the major 2 triad, up to the 4. This is that exact same progression, just kind of buried in a set of hybrid dominance over this pedal. So, I started out with the 1 over the 5 pedal, 5 over the 5 pedal, the flat 3 over the 5 pedal. Now the major 2. There's the weird one right there. But I keep that 5 pedal and I go to the 4 chord. So there's your little Beatles progression at the end. A minor 4 over the 5 pedal, and then back to 1 finally. So just kind of letting those triads go over that 5 pedal makes all that kind of magic. Whenever you get that, this particular voicing, I'm about to use this again in a second, but I call this the Carole King voicing because it's kind of right at the beginning of the chorus of "You've Got a Friend," and I've actually become kind of fond of this voicing, so keep an eye out for it as you do stuff. The other example I wanted to throw that out, it's actually the one I played in the intro to this video. The song's called "Sepia Tone Photo." I had kind of been jumping around at a bunch of other chords, and I don't remember how I discovered this, but I actually started, I kind of came from a G chord. I started the chorus on this, I'm kind of just zipping through, holding on to the G chord as I get into it. I just jump out of nowhere into this falling sequence. It starts on this tense chord, and it kind of wants to just fall down, but I'm using this pedal C, this pedal 4, and it really doesn't want to stay there, so I let that fall, and now I feel like this kind of wanted to fall, and I wound up with this chord, which is kind of stretchy, but really what's happening is, I have the C pedal over the first thing. That works okay, but now I got like a flat 7 in the bass. This wants to move, but since I've been moving, I kind of want to move some more, and I really felt like I wanted to hear this note go down, so you get this voicing. It's just a major triad with the, with the 5th drop, which I've liked this voicing a lot, but again, when I have this note in the bass, I can never reach it, so I had to kind of cross-fretted, you have to bar 3 there, 2 there, and then you have to get those up there. That took me a while to get used to grab, and I still miss it sometimes. Here's the whole passage. It's all kind of falling down, and it keeps going. It took me a while to get that, and again, I haven't even analyzed that, but really the thing that kind of came to me there was you have these different voices moving, but I started with bass notes and triads that didn't quite belong together, but they're kind of working off of each other. They really worked well, and I just followed the voice leading my ears wanted, and it led me through some funky chords, but I really liked how that passage came out. So, letting the bass and the triads do something separate leads you really cool places. Another really good example, actually at the beginning of Sepia Tone Photo, at the beginning of the first verse, starts out on the 1 chord, and does the Carole King chord. You go, keep the 1 bass, you go to the 5, but then you kind of do the same voicing almost a whole step down. Actually, that's a lie. That's a different voicing. So what I'm doing is I'm using the bass goes down to the flat 7, but then you keep a C up here. So almost what you've done is you've done, like, again, one of these very standard progressions. You've done 1 to 5 to 4, which just basically was G, D, C, but I use this bass here, and I get out of it by having the bass go to C and the results back to 1. But it's really like 1, 5 with a 1 bass, 4 with a flat 7 bass, and then just a regular 4, and back to 1. You know, this is the funky chord right here. This 4 chord with a flat 7 bass. That's really kind of the spicy area for me there, because you don't quite know where you are for a little bit there, but it's a really kind of nice suspension before you kind of slip back into the scene, And to me, that one also came all out of voice leading. Actually, a friend of mine gave me that progression. I kind of threw it into this song because I wanted to use it somewhere. So that's another example of how voice leading stuff and like just holding pedals can let some really, really nice sets of changes happen. There's one other progression I came up with I really wanted to throw out there. So the song I probably used, I littered one particular song. It's called Old Piano, with just a gajillion of these chords. And it's probably the song I've used the most of these in. And the bridge in particular has, the way it retransitions into the chorus, got some funky stuff in it. So let's see here. Where do I want to start? I'll play a little passage and then we'll break it down a bit. So I'm coming from... It's a story of giving up something you love for someone you love even more. 'Cause I can take the pain you make me feel and send it back to you in the shape of something beautiful. 'Cause that's just how I do when I tell them they look so grand. It's love when I touch you with both hands, etc., etc. That's the transition back into the chorus. Sorry, I'm trying not to scream and I don't want to blow my microphone out. But, so, if I start from the beginning of that, at this point, the bridge has gotten to the key of B flat. So here we are, B flat chord. Starts walking up to the 2, C minor. This is just a D flat, you know, nothing super fancy. Right here is where I start to move to another key. So again, it's like I'm kind of using this as a dominant to tonicize another key. So here I got an E flat with a D flat triad over it. So it's kind of going to this. It's kind of like what James Taylor would do with, like, you know, the 1 and the flat 7. It's kind of like the flat 7 hybrid dominant almost. But again, it's kind of almost sounding like it wants to go to A flats. But the melody I'm singing there actually kind of conflicts with that a bit. I'm kind of singing, it's the story of giving up something you love for someone you love even more. Da, 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 da. That kind of G flat in the melody, that's like E flat. I guess that's F, A flat, G, F. That F is still kind of emphasizing the B flatness of the whole thing. It doesn't really fit with this chord much at all. Na 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 na. It's like singing the 9 over it. So they're not quite on the same page, and where it goes next is this guy right here. It's another one of my weird voicings I came up with. So this is a C minor chord over an F bass. Kind of hard to grab in context. And at this point, you're kind of like, where the heck am I? Where it's going is this G minor, which I think it resolves to it fairly nicely. It's almost like, you know, you could kind of hear it both ways. The C minor to the G minor is easy. The F to the G minor is easy. But C minor F to G, a little trickier, but it works. And I think, you know, with the, you know, as this phrase starts to destabilize, these chords get a lot more handy because they're pretty, but they're not super dissonant. But they also kind of make you wonder, okay, where am I? But they also find their way back into the key easily. So we're coming from this C minor, kind of going up, starting to feel like another key. And instead of going A flat, you know, it almost feels like I went to a 3 somehow, but, you know, okay, it's sitting in G minor. And from the G minor, I kind of fall down to a G minor slash F. So it's like I'm in the key and kind of doing a hybrid dominant based on this new thing. It's almost like it's G minor for a little bit. And this is where it starts to get real twisty, where this is again where I kind of use the minor voicing. So I got an F minor with a B flat bass. This is the minor with the 4th and the bass. And I kind of use this as sort of a walk up. So this is F minor with a B flat bass. This is G minor with a C bass. This is A flat with a D flat bass, and this is B flat with an E flat bass. And I don't really know how I came up with this. I kind of just, I guess I thought of it as almost like just like a walk up, you know, that would, you know, maybe go back to, you know, in the key of E flat. But I use these kind of altered bass notes to keep it feeling really unstable. And And the melody I do, I kind of go, but that's just how I do. And that G over that B flat with the E flat bass chord really kind of almost pulls you back to C, which is where it's going. That's essentially what I do. I kind of end up singing the melody through to C, which calls you back to the chorus. 'Cause that's just how I do, and I tell them that, and I... That E definitely doesn't fit over this E flat bass, so it kind of tenses you into that, where you kind of go back to just sort of a standard C progression. Yeah, but there's a couple of times when I found, even in sepia tone photo, I use a similar kind of rising thing where it's like, you know, everyone's kind of used to the thing you get in Layla, where it's like... Kind of got the minor one, flat 7, flat 6. It's basically that progression. You know, there's kind of walk-ups. But in sort of a dressed-up form. In sepia tone photo, I also have a passage like that. Whereas it's kind of going through the bridge and driving in the fall to smell the leaves upon the breeze. That's just, you know, here's just flat 6, flat 7, 1. Right here, just grabbed a chord from outside the key. Yeah, I'm just walking up with that. You know, that's a C over a B flat. That's a D over a C over a D chord. That's E over a D. It's still hard to tell where you are at this point. It winds right back up in E minor. You know, but this is basically like, you know, it's almost like C, E, just what it was just doing. But this B flat chord in there, you know, again, it's pretty, but this B flat doesn't belong in the key at all. So I think this voicing softens up an out of key chord like that and lets it have kind of a mysterious quality until things find their way back in. And back to where it started. Etc., etc. So those are just some examples that I came up with that I think are interesting. They entertained me enough to write them all down. To sum it up, the big idea for me is like taking chord progressions that are really common and changing them into these hybrid dominants just to see what they'll do. I mean, any chord progression you're kind of sick of, I would say either take the bass note or the triad that you have and try switching from that chord, like convert it to one of these hybrid dominants. So let's say, and you've got like a 1-4-5 progression. If we're in the key of G, like I don't know if this is going to work, but we're just going to, just to give you an example, if you know, you could take the C and the D chord, and to turn them into hybrid dominants, you either are going to take the bass note and raise it by a whole step, or the triad and lower it by a whole step. You know, so if I take the C chord, you know, to raise the bass by a whole step, you know, the C becomes a D. So, you know, instead I have C with a D bass, and then have D with an E bass. So instead of, you're gonna have G, D, C with the D bass, E with the G bass. I think that's kind of nice. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of drive to it, but it's a little more mysterious than it was before. So that's an example. The alternative way to do it is, again, to take the triad and make it, you know, a whole step lower. So if I was to take that C, to lower the triad C, you're going to go down a whole step to B flat. So now you're going to have C with a B flat, or I guess B flat triad with a C, and then you have a D with a C. So let's see what that sounds like. You got G, C with B flat. Sounds a little funkier. So anything you do, I think trying to, you know, hear what the chord sounds like, but then feel your way into what it's going to be, you know, that is a good way to start. Just take any chord progression you're sick of, apply that little method to it, and see what you get, and just mess around with some other stuff. But I mean, like I said, I hope that's, you know, helpful for people. Hope that gets some ideas out there. Yeah. Like I said, you know, keep an eye out for the listener effect songs, because there'll be good examples of how this all gets used in context. And yeah, I mean, that's really all for me today. I'll catch y'all on another thing pretty soon.